Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas White, and this is my informative speech on the hero of Betty Ong. And not many people know who Betty Ong is. Betty Ong, her full name was Betty Ann Ong. She was born on February the 5th, 1956 in California. She was the youngest of four siblings, and she was always gifted with a great sense of humor, a tremendous respect for life. She loved life. And she was a flight attendant for 14 years for American Airlines. Her work ethic is something that all her peers, all her family, and all her co-workers definitely had something to say about. As I said, she worked tirelessly for American Airlines for 14 years. She quickly arose to the top as being the head position in the flight attendant, high as you can go. She was a non-stop worker, according to her peers and her supervisors and her family. She never relaxed on a flight. When people were asleep, she would go to the closet or wherever the blankets were in the airplane, and she would cover up those people who were asleep. The people who weren't asleep had conversations with Betty. She was a very outgoing person, very outspoken person, and she loved to have a conversation with anybody and everybody who was on the flight. And it was also noted that it was not unusual for Betty to take a baby of a passenger and tend and care for it while that passenger got some rest, depending how long the flight was. Her work ethic was such a tremendous thing for Betty Ong that it really spoke volumes to what kind of character and what kind of person Betty Ong was. She had a love for people, and also she had a love for life. When her days off came, she would drive 30 minutes from her house to the city of Boston, Massachusetts, where she would go on walks with senior citizens and children, and she would walk with them and have a day with them, with senior citizens. She always made it a point to get to know senior citizens on a flight. She always made it a point to get to know the kids that were on a flight. And she would go down to Boston, Massachusetts, and she would go on walks with them, and she would tell them about every place she had been on her far travels as a flight attendant. And why Betty Ong is such a hero? Because she was a member, a flight attendant, on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Betty got up that day just like any other day. American Airlines Flight 11 was departing Boston, Massachusetts at 7:45 a.m. It was headed to Los Angeles, California. Flight 11 offered nonstop trips to Boston to Los Angeles each day. There were 81 passengers who boarded the flight. 5 of them were the hijackers. The plane took off at 7:59 a.m. in the morning. And just like any other day on the flight of American Airlines, Betty was up, walking around, doing her usual thing, making sure everybody was comfortable, making sure everybody had what they needed. At 8:14 in the morning, the airplane had climbed to 29,000 feet. And that was the last time air control had contact with American Airlines Flight 11. At that same time, it is commented and noted, and the source where I got this from was the Commission of Terrorist Attacks on the US of A. And it was on the Commission report that this was the last routine communication with air control, and American Airlines Flight 11 was cleared to go to Los Angeles. Around this time, at 8:14, or shortly thereafter, American Airlines had begun to be hijacked. 5 minutes later, after the hijacking of American Airlines Flight 11, Betty Ong contacted the American Airlines office in Cary, North Carolina. She called in from an AT&T airphone to report the emergency. At 8:19, Betty was on the phone, and this was her exact statement on the phone as it was recorded. "The cockpit is not answering. Somebody stabbed in business class, and I think there's mace. We cannot breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked." Now, the other woman on the other line in Cary, North Carolina was Nadia Gonzalez. She was the woman who answered the phone call from Betty Ong and stayed on the line for her for about approximately 26 minutes. And this is what happened on the heroic phone call. At 8:26 a.m., Betty stated to the Mrs. Gonzalez that the plane was flying erratically. As Betty was on the phone call with Mrs. Gonzalez, she was also helping the passengers who were on the flight. She was providing them oxygen, providing them drinks, providing them blankets to shelter with, providing them with anything, any type of comfort. At 8:38 a.m., Betty advised Mrs. Gonzalez that the plane was flying erratically again. And at this time, she provided the seat numbers of the hijackers that were on the plane. That went on later to be very beneficial to the investigation of 9/11 and the flight hijacking of American Airlines 11. She also stated that the aircraft was rapidly in descent. At 8:44 a.m., the call between Betty Ong and Natalia Gonzalez was lost. At 8:46 and 20 seconds, American Flight 11 struck the World Trade Center North Tower. Natty Gonzalez, 3 years later, had an interview on C-SPAN where she noted and stated in an interview to avoid the media that was putting down Betty Ong. It was stated that Betty was erratic and confused and terrified. She went on record in a statement in front of the United States of America to tell everybody that she was completely in control the entire time American Flight 11 was being hijacked. She was in such control and such poise that she gave information to the US of A that not only got them the seat numbers for the hijackers who hijacked American Flight 11, but with this call, due to Betty Ong's heroic call, for the first time and the only time in U.S. history, this is when they shut down all air control in the United States. All planes landed to their nearest airport. All helicopters landed to their nearest bases. And all flights in the United States were canceled. With this call, investigators were able to identify and track down the hijackers of American Flight 11. And I encourage you to go on YouTube and type in Nadia Gonzalez and listen to her interview about how the heroics of Betty Ong changed the world.